The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Great to have you in on a Tuesday. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and you will get our starting five shout-outs, a little bit of portal news. Tim Verghese tweeting this out about 15 minutes ago with Inside Nebraska on Jonah Wilson. Maybe a little bit of a rush on my end yesterday, thinking he was all in. Not so fast, as they say. Some thoughts on that. We'll hear from Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch will join us here in about 15 minutes. In hour two, we'll get things kicked off with Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7 Sports. And then Matt Schick going to be with us of ESPN, Sirius XM, and the Schick and Nick podcast. Schick back with us here in the new year. 489-1240, 489-1240 to get in. 800-825-5865. Can send an email, Chris at hailvarsity.com. So the dead period gets done Thursday. You've had the suits and ties now get to decide on just one portal window, with the college football coaches unanimously saying, dude, no more two portal sessions, no more portal during the bowl season. Make it stop. So they are up to the mercy of the folks that the Pirate, Coach Leach, wasn't a fan of, those in committees. So we'll dive into that. You have a shorter portal window, which, I don't know. We're not coaches, so it's okay. We have everything and anything to talk about with there not being any off season. So we'll get there. We'll ask the question here about Nebraska next season, specifically when it comes to question marks or doubts, right? What gives you pause about Nebraska football moving forward? This isn't a negative Tuesday. It's just a fair question to ask out loud, because the one thing you know about college football is the uncertainty. There's uncertainty with your roster. There's a lot of moving and shaking that's going to happen between now and when winter conditioning gets kicked up next week, and then spring football, and then the spring portal, and then summertime, and then, oh yeah, the season's here. By the way, Elijah, get down to 105.
It's the right way to put this. We've dove right into this conversation here. It's just it's a whirlwind, and it's so hard for me to sit here in January.
Objectively, you can step back and say pros, cons, unknown.
Yeah, but it's hard for me to say what's a pro and what's a con with the amount of unknowns, I guess is the right way to put it.
Sure.
With the cut down that still needs to happen with, I mean, we kind of talked about, I think it was our other show, the Average Joe Sports Show on Sunday, where we talked about the fact there's probably going to be guys that came via the transfer portal this year that don't even make it to fall camp. That they're going to make it through spring football and say, you know what, this isn't it for me, I'm back into the portal. Like, that's a reality of what is probably going to happen, not just at Nebraska, but at other schools. So, not to mention the fact that we have unknowns about what the Dana Holgorsen offense looks like in 2025. What does the John Butler defense look like in 2025? There's so many unknowns, but are
you afraid of the great unknown?
A little bit.
That's
a
fair.
little bit. There's a lot of unknowns in a season where it feels like the expectation needs to be 9 wins.
I think that's a fair expectation. We're already getting there in January 13th. Nine's got to get it done. But, I mean, Ohio State fan, you didn't know what the hell you were going to get. You thought you were going to get a good quarterback in Will Howard. Some bumps and bruises along the way. But it was Ohio State's too big to fail, at least to get to the championship game right now. Notre Dame, that's out of nowhere. They went portal shopping a second time, and they got in a second portal quarterback that's been perfect for them. What's driven them's their head coach, their defense, and just this ability to not die after the worst loss of the playoff teams to Northern Illinois. They rallied. They picked themselves up off the mat, so to speak, and here they are. So they're a good story, but it's not always the case. You have Texas that could be in this ball game if they'd handle business inside the one with all their talent and all their draft grades and prospects that are out there. And then there's Nebraska, as they are a team like Notre Dame trying to get back to the promised land.
Yeah, yes and no. The big difference between Nebraska, what I see in 2025, from a brand standpoint, yes. The big difference, though, from what I see from Nebraska and the teams that are still, I guess I shouldn't say still remaining, because
teams that made it.
The teams that made it to the Final Four or even the Final Eight, is the fact that, I mean, how many new starters is Nebraska bringing in through the transfer portal this offseason? You saw it with Indiana and Arizona State, yes, but those teams also didn't make as deep a run as they would have liked. Like, you had 3 of your top 4 wide receivers are going to be transfer portal guys. Mm-hmm. 1, if not 2 tackles, depending on how the situation plays out with Pete over the next week or so. Like, you might have 2 new offensive linemen, brand new starters via the transfer portal. You look defensively, and you've got probably 3 of your top 4 linebackers going to be transfer portal guys. Secondary, half of the secondary might be portal guys by the time you get to the end of it. We'll see what happens with Waneri, but that might be a defensive lineman who comes in via the transfer portal.
It's going to be Survivor Island.
Your punter is a portal guy. Your long snapper is a portal guy. We're talking half of Nebraska's key contributors next season are probably going to be portal guys, which is a brand new unknown for Nebraska. Other schools have done it. Look at Indiana, you look at Colorado, yes, but for Nebraska and for Matt Rhule, that many new guys being brought in is a complete unknown.
It is, but it's the new college football world. You are shaking your roster up unless you're satisfied with what you have, but that's not been the case. You've had USC make quarterback moves in season. Miami, as well as they have typically recruited, they go shopping in the portal, right? You got to win now and acquire talent now. And just because it's new, that is you worry about the chemistry part, right? What you want is the guys that have been there a while to climb their way up and win, and that's well and good. You're going to have guys in this program that are going into a 3rd and a 4th year. That's not going to be foreign, but you're just not going to have as many of them because you're going to have to make a decision. You have to make a decision after spring and into summer, more so after spring, to whittle down to 105 or get down there to at least your top 120 and say, okay, we've got to be right, and we have to have some depth with who we're taking. Who are we going to have in that offensive line room? Who makes the cut? Who makes the cut in the secondary? Because this spring, whether you're a scholarship guy and out of high school or whether you're a portal dude, it's all contingent on doing your job and showing the coaches, here's what I can provide the football team. I mean, it's business. It is business now, and the business is to go win and compete in the Big Ten. The business is to be what Illinois was this season. The business is to figure out a way to climb into that top 4 in the Big Ten if you're Matt Rhule in Nebraska, and do it sooner rather than later, because year 5 was great after year 1. You're now after year 2 in an upside-down world of college football where it's changed. Nebraska has changed with it. And what can you do with what you've went out and got? And I'm for it. I am for not standing pat. I'm for acquiring more talent. And I'm for, I don't care if feathers are ruffled. Bring in as much talent as you can bring in and let competition decide.
Well, that's, you talk about the business model. It's the NFL model. Mm-hmm. How many guys does the NFL bring to fall camp? How many guys make the roster? It's simple math. It leads to competition.
53.
And you're bringing in with your rookies,
practice squad,
camp, practice squad, undrafted guys. You're bringing in close to 100 guys to an NFL training camp.
Yeah.
and you cut down to 53, it's not going to be that dramatic in college football, but there is going to be, I think Nebraska...
Some places might be.
Nebraska's going to carry, probably 130 guys into spring?
Got to.
And then there's probably going to be some natural attrition after that, down to, 120, 115, if I had to guess?
Probably be 125.
And then you got through the summer to try to lock down those spots and get it down to 105. Like, it's going to, you would hope, bring the best out of people, the best out of some portal guys that have been at a couple different places and know they need to stick at their next spot. Like, it should bring the best out of people, but there's still just so many unknowns with what that entails and how it changes college football.
It's so weird. It's so weird to wrap your arms around it with what you're used to versus what it is. Who's on the horn?
Steve and Lincoln.
Steve-O, what's up?
Hello, this is Steve from Lincoln. Chris, I want to just reinforce what you stated. I am so 100% in agreement with your statements. Bring in the competition to Husker football and let the chips fall where they might. Let there be competitors and not participants. I'll make it quick. I know you got a full plate. Your Hail Varsity Radio station indeed is number one. Great everything. You guys cover super topics about Husker sports. Great information. Number two, as promised, I've been spreading the word about your great radio station, Hail Varsity, and getting new listeners. I want to give a shout-out to a new listener named Kyle, Husker fan. He's an L.A. Dodger fan. He attended a game last year. Great Husker fan and a fantasy football commissioner. And lastly, Chris, Elijah, I want you guys to comment a little more about that Texas Longhorn play at the 1 yard line. Time running out, Texas needing the touchdown, and what do? They pitch the ball backwards 8 yards. What say you, Chris and Elijah, about that?
You go north and south, Steve. Thanks for listening, bud. Appreciate you listening and your fandom, man. It means a lot. Thanks again for that. Just don't go wide. Go up the middle. North and south.
To be fair, Texas didn't have a lot of success going north and south.
Not a lot of giddy up, I understand.
But you're at the one and you had 4 plays to go north and south.
Well, you just wonder about old Arch Manning and how the cobwebs were, because you could have sure used a little quarterback mobility, maybe.
I don't wonder about the cobwebs. I wonder about the health of the brain.
That's what I mean.
That's what you mean?
Yeah.
That's an old way, or person way to say it compared to my generation where concussions were paramount of importance.
Well, the cobwebs were clearly thick because the helmet was taken. I should have said his eggs were scrambled. Sorry.
That's not a politically correct way to say that at all.
Well,
in today's day and age, Smitty, eggs were scrambled?
Yeah, his eggs scrambled a little bit. Is that all right?
You were a child of the 80s, weren't you?
I was.
We see, in my era, Schmitty, we had to take concussions very seriously.
And you do, for sure.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like you're taking them seriously.
Doesn't matter.
Cobwebs and scrambled eggs.
With my my old IQ / SAT / GPA, doesn't matter.
That's like something an NFL representative says whenever they don't want to admit to the concussions in the NFL. Like, those eggs were just a little scrambled. It's not a concussion.
Just rub some dirt on it, sniff a little glue, and it's okay. We'll talk to Mitch Sherman. Uncle Larry is in. Thank you, Uncle Larry, for checking us out. The other Dave is here. Arlo is in. Mike in from Cali. Mike, you be safe, brother. Pete is the word, right? Down to Michigan and Nebraska. You have Great Red Shark is in. 3-putt back at it. Good to have you. Says, let's petition to get spring game to be a live scrimmage versus another team. I think that's awesome. NASCAR Eric is here. Good to have you, NASCAR Eric. QB1 Ace in from North Arkansas. Appreciate you, QB1 Ace. Anonymous says the over-under on the number of toes, wow, the next Colorado coach may have. Wow, is it higher than indeed. 8? You think my concussion smack is bad? Jeff is here. Jeff, good to have you. Coach Brandon in. Tim in from Idaho. Tim, thank you. Justin is here. Justin asking the question, Pete, for the repeat offseason national championship again. Steven is in. I'm drinking the off-season Kool-Aid with a double shot of tequila. You hammer that tequila. Terry is in. Terry, good afternoon to you, sir. Mike is here. The real Matthew checks in. Steve and Ken also in. And Wayne from Winter. I believe Winter, South Dakota. Maybe Wayne. I don't know. Pretty sure Indiana and Arizona State are pleased with their season for sure. Black Hills Brennan getting in. Good to have Black Hills Brennan in. We'll talk to Mitch Sherman here a little bit more. Jonah Wilson, as we told you a little bit about with the tweet out from Tim Verghese, the Houston wideout that we thought was going to end up in Lincoln, scholarship deal, not on the table for Jonah Wilson, a walk-on opportunity. A&M had a scholarship available. Again, Tim Verghese is reporting this here about a half hour ago. And Jonah is off to A&M. I'll say this. I love Nebraska's wide receiver room. And I like Nebraska's wide receiver room not because of the talent, but I like the wide receiver room because of the coaching of said talent.
Well, talent's pretty good, too.
Talent's great, but I think there's accountability in that room. Mitch Sherman's on the way on a Tuesday with Hail Varsity.
It's that time.
Hey, Mitch. Mitchie. We're looking for you, pal.
Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, talking Big Red.
Unleash the fury, Mitch.
Unleash the fury!
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you. Hail Varsity continues. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Mitch Sherman with us from The Athletic, and catch his awesome work weekday mornings with the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Mitch, how you doing? What's the good word?
I'm doing well. The word is that it's cold, but not as cold as it was 10 hours ago, so that's good.
It's warming up. Going to be a little bit better.
17 right now, so it's warming up.
Yeah, it's fantastic. At least we'll get some good weather Thursday, as we'll see how packed and jammed PBA is for Rutgers coming to town.
I know the cold weather before all of the transfers arrive here late this week and into the weekend, and the early enrolling freshmen at Nebraska arrive. Get rid of the cold weather now, so it's not so much of a shock to the system of the Southerners and West Coast guys.
Dude, they're going to show up Thursday, Friday, and it's going to be 50 or 49. You'll be like, all right, this is great. And then this weekend is going to slap them.
I mean, you might as well just let it happen because you can't avoid it. Even if you were to come in your first January, and I just talked to this afternoon to Andrew Marshall, who's coming to Nebraska from Idaho, but really from Southern California. And you might as well just get the cold weather when you come. It's January. You're going to have to deal with it. So don't let it be a surprise and happen 2 weeks after your arrival. And then, it'll only get better from there because there are warmer days ahead.
Mitch, not without revealing too much, I know you got some work coming out on Marshall, but he's a nice puzzle piece. And overall, I know you did a story here end of last week just on all the work Nebraska's done in this new world that they've adapted to. Nebraska's always wanted to be a development program. They'll still develop, but the supplementation is kind of the way of life of college football. What do you think of Nebraska's not only profile but evaluation so far, not only addressing the needs but getting the kids to come to Lincoln?
Yeah, it's a changed world. It's a changed world from 24 months ago or 26 months ago when Matt Rhules signed that contract with Nebraska and laid out his vision for what Nebraska would be, the type of program that it would be, and the way that they would recruit and the way that they would bring players along in their program. And, that was all within the parameters that allowed you to have 140 or 150 players and a scout team and run practice a certain way and be patient with young players and have walk-on supplement things and recruit the heck out of the state of Nebraska. And, all of those things have changed, some more drastically than others. Of course, Nebraska still wants to get the best players from the state of Nebraska, but 105 players on the roster and teams that can go from 3 wins to 11 in one season because of the portal and all of the money that's involved now, not just through NIL, but coming in 2025 through revenue sharing. It's up to the urgency. It's changed the game. And for Nebraska, the task, Nebraska and programs like Nebraska, there's plenty of them in the Big Ten. The task has become more complicated in finding a balance between being a place where players are allowed to develop and have time to develop, but also somewhere where that you need to do everything you can to win right now. And that was never not the case. Nebraska's always looked to do everything it could to win right now. It's just that the resources that allow you to be able to do it are different. And Nebraska's in a place now where its best move is to go out and sign 16 or 17 transfers here in December and January and put a team together that gives it the best opportunity to win in 2025. We know that's what's required. That's what's demanded. That's what this program needs to do in year 3 under Matt Rhule. You made a 2-game improvement in the win column from year 1 to year 2, and something similar is going to be expected from year 2 to year 3.
Mitch, with all the portal guys coming in, we briefly kind of hit on this back in the first segment. I said there's a chance that half of the guys you have on offense and defense next year could be portal guys. That'd be a high number, but it's possible with the number you're bringing in. What is the number you think Nebraska needs to have? Of these guys that they've brought in thus far, how many guys do they need to go and be starters? How many guys need to come in and compete? It feels like it's a less developmental portal class than it had been the first couple of years of the Rhule.
I think it's just a less developmental program than it has been for Matt Rhule in 2 years at Nebraska. There are positions, offensive line, you're going to continue to do that. Nebraska has brought 1 offensive lineman in out of the portal. We'll continue to work to bring in another one at some point, either now or in April, but May. But wide receiver, defensive back, linebacker, even on the defensive line, you see it. They're not as much about development. Yeah, you sign someone out of high school, they don't have to step in right away and play. They are going to have time to develop. But at the same time, he's going to recruit players to play ahead of them immediately after those incoming freshmen sign. It's just, like I said a minute ago, it's just a different environment, a different landscape in college football than what he's accustomed to and what I think Nebraska fans are accustomed to. So how many need to compete right away? All of the older ones, the guys who have 1 or 2 years left, that's a half a dozen or more. I think you get to the point where it's double digits of the 16 who are officially in for Nebraska that need to be in a position to compete for starting spots or rotational spots in 2025.
Mitch Sherman's with us, Hail Varsity Radio, at Mitch Sherman on Twitter. Read him, obviously, with The Athletic, and check out his podcast, Locked On Nebraska, weekday mornings. It is pretty interesting. Mitch, one of the names, there's 3 on defense, and you mentioned Marshall from a secondary standpoint and a return guy, but Nwaneri, McCullough, and then Watson, Trout. Tell me what do you expect, or what's a fair expectation for a Nwaneri and even a McCullough? McCullough's played a lot of college football, super talented, couple of stops. Nwaneri's, of course, an all-world projection out of high school as a 5-star.
Yeah, what they have in common is super high-level athleticism, and I think versatility to do numerous things for your defense. Now, Nwaneri is going to play defensive end, in some way, whether it's in a 3-man front or a 4-man front. He's going to be a pass rusher. Like they're going to find ways to allow him to get after the quarterback. McCullough, he's like, so Nebraska signed Jeremiah Jones out of high school, out of Kentucky, and the number of positions that he plays, he could play is extensive. On both sides of the ball. McCullough's, he's a defensive guy, but he's similar in that you could see him lining up at Rover. You could see him lining up and coming off the edge, like a jack linebacker or even a defensive end in a four-man front. You could see him at just a traditional outside linebacker or safety role. So there's a number of things that he could do. Both of those guys are just brimming with athleticism and high-end talent. The difference is that McCullough has all kinds of experience. He's done it in Indiana. He's been a productive player at Oklahoma, where Nwaneri has been in college for just 1 year. So you're probably it's probably a longer on ramp with him to get on the field and be doing things that people see for him. It's more down the road. I think he's a piece of it this year in 2025, but not on this, maybe not on the same level that McCullough is, where he just walks in and he's a big part of your defense.
It's Mitch Sherman with us here from The Athletic on Hail Varsity Radio. And Mitch, I want to take it back to a conversation we had to lead off this show. With what we know right now, it feels like Nebraska's baseline expectation is 8, if not 9 wins in 2025. It's kind of the place they need to reach in year 3 for the rebuild to be considered on track, at least in my mind. As it stands right now, what are your biggest doubts for Nebraska's ability to go get 8, 9 wins?
Well, really, because I don't think we've seen that kind of a team come together yet. And Nebraska did incur a lot of losses through both graduation and via the portal, too. So while it's easy to get excited, and I think it's justifiable, you should get excited about the players that Nebraska's brought in, both in its freshman class and in the portal. There's a lot of it's a juggling act right now, because you're trying to acclimate, close to 40 new players. Not all 40 are here next week, but a good chunk of those 36 right now. A good chunk of those 36 are. It's by the time you get to August, it's probably going to be about 40 players. So trying to acclimate all of those new pieces while reducing the roster from where it is right now, still by somewhere in the range of 25 to 30 players, it could be to the detriment of Nebraska's chemistry. So that's a challenge in front of Matt Rhule, is to get this program and more specifically this exact team in a place where it's ready to play and ready to be the best version of itself at the end of August. You're not at your best at the end of August, but good enough to win going into September, coming out of August going into September. That's a challenge. There's a lot that still has to be done to shape this team on the field, off the field, in the locker room, just the dynamic of it before you even think about playing a football game. So there are other programs that are going through the changes in college football right now that don't have that steep of a challenge in front of them to get their team in a place where they're all on the same page. This is not even to mention all of the changes that have been made on the coaching staff already since the end of not even the end, since early November in the 2024 season.
Mitch, about 30 seconds. Your gut says, what about Deion in Colorado? You think he stays? You think he heads off the NFL?
Boy, I think ultimately he goes, and I think it probably happens this offseason. Whether it's the Cowboys or not, we'll see. I think if he has that opportunity, then to me, that's hard for him to pass up. Mm-hmm. But hey, he's made an impact on that Colorado program, and I think they got what they needed from him. Now, whether he leaves now or sometime in the future, it'll be on the Buffs to build on that.
For sure. Mitch, good stuff. Appreciate talking with you, and we'll do it again soon. Thank you much.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, there he is. Good stuff from Mitch Sherman. Open phones here till 5 with Hail Varsity.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? We're not pointing you yet.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We'll get to some of your stream comments. Jay says, hi, Elijah.
Howdy, Jay.
And Anonymous says, turn Jeremiah Jones into a Randy Gregory type, minus the elephant tranquilizer. Okay. Tiger Shark says, get me a running back, get me a center, get me an offensive tackle. All good there. Grateful Red chimes in and says, look, Neon Deion never intended to stay in Boulder. He's been, quote, coaching his boys since Pop Warner Ball. Why would he stop when they go pro? Well, we'll ask Matt Schick about that coming up, what he thinks about Coach Prime. Brian says, well, year 3 is put up or shut up for Rhules with Nebraska. If not this year, how many years does he need to get this thing moving in the right direction? He can't continue to sell hope. 9 wins, please.
Well, let me ask. What does 7-5 in year 3 do for you? There's nuance to that. You have to ask the question, how does it look? That's going to be important. But just on its face, what is 7-5 in year 3?
On its face, says the following: you had another bad November. You had another tough 1-score situation, and you either weren't able to acquire as good or better talent than you faced, or you had better talent you didn't coach up.
Well, based on what I see in the portal so far, you brought in some guys.
I think they have too.
Some guys that should be draft picks if they live up to their athletic potential, if you can get the most out of them. So it says to me you're not winning the games you should be winning if it's 7-5.
That's the other point. We just laid out some tough discussions. If that is the case, if you're 7-5 with your schedule next year, it's hard to win. I totally get that. That's been beaten into my head the last 12 years of covering this football team.
It's hard to win, but they make it look much harder than it should be with the resources that you have in place compared to other schools that you continuously lose to.
Tended to do that.
Yeah.
Now,
say what you will about James Franklin. I think the task in year 3 is to go out and win the games you should win, and that's James Franklin's specialty. He wins the games he should win.
Right, and he wins some close ones that turn into, well, other teams, lesser teams would have been nipped by the Minnesotas in a 1-point ball game.
Mm-hmm.
He survives those. He survives USC in overtime on the road after being down 14. I mean, those are just a couple of examples. And you're recruiting and spending at a really nice level at Nebraska. So you've hired a coordinator that's really good at what he does. When it comes to quarterbacks and you got a receivers coach, we think you got a really good offensive line coach. I agree with that. And we like what we saw in a limited sample of Butler and the way the defense played, aside from a couple of guys tackling. So away you go. But 7 wins, dude, people will be irate.
Yeah, Trevor in the stream here, I think underscoring that point, says, what does 7-5 look like?
Jeez.
He says, looks like a dirty tampon on a toilet
Just
seat.
skip over that. Trevor, that is colorful language. And, well...
It paints the picture.
That's right.
It paints the picture.
That was a Picasso job with words, Trevor. Who's with us?
You go to Paul.
Paul, thanks for hanging. Go for it.
Hey, gentlemen, 2 quick questions. Cincinnati, I know it's way too darn early. What are your thoughts? These guys going to upset us, or are we going to beat the crap out of them?
I think we're going to be tailgating in Arrowhead's parking lot for a live radio show.
And to get back to the conversation we were just having, there's still unknowns with both of these football teams, which probably won't get answered till the end of summer. This is a game based on resources, based on the crowd support you're going to have at Arrowhead.
You don't lose.
It's one of the games that you should be winning.
Arrowhead.
They have some good players.
Exactly.
You have the resources. You have the quote-unquote home field advantage with this one. It's a game you should be winning.
You don't lose it.
Oh, we absolutely going to have the home field advantage. Did you see the stadium seats going up like poof, like fire in certain locales that we shouldn't mock or make fun of? I mean, Nebraska bought out all of our side of the field and went around the bowl into the Cincinnati side.
That's what Cincinnati wanted. That's why they moved it. Pay us.
Exactly.
Pay us.
Second question here is special teams coordination at Nebraska. Do we have any word yet? And does it start with Bill Bush?
I don't know.
It starts internal. From everything I've heard, the first candidates that they're going to be discussing this job with are internal, already on staff.
Okay, so it starts internal. Bushy'd be a great pick. Super good at what he does. Eckler is another guy I like from Tennessee. His units have spoken for themselves. The guy has coached in North Carolina. He's coached at LSU. He's coached at Indiana. He's coached at Kansas. He coached at Nebraska. He's been in North Texas. I mean, Eckler's traveled around and is known as a recruiter in his early 50s. So that's my other take. You have John Butler and his NFL connections. John Butler's a special teams hound himself. That's what he's always coached. So I'm sure he'll have an NFL suggestion or two.
Any thoughts about Rhule wanting to have part of that job, at least, if not the whole job, for himself?
I think that's fair. I know we've kind of talked about that a little bit, but if you want it to absolutely get fixed on your watch, if you're running it, hey, that's a problem solver for me. That's a good idea.
The old adage, if you want it done right, do it yourself.
Do it yourself. Well, and your head coach, you've got a guy you brought in to coordinate the defense. How much cooking will the defensive coordinator allow the head coach to do? Some the coordinators don't want any interference. And we know Dana's going to run the offense. So go to your office, coach. Thank you.
But the last thing I will say with this conversation, though, is the fact that it's not an urgent position that you need to fill today.
It's an urgent fix come August.
Urgent fix come, well, let's say spring football. Spring football, you got to have your guy in place, but it's not something you need to have done in
You've got a guy you brought in that's a punter that did well. You got a long snapper that is on target with which nipple he's going to snap it to, Elijah.
It's from a different show, but good callback.
Left nipple or left nipple or right nipple, right? and you presumably got a holder that has had his life threatened. And you got a kicker that can bomb it from 55 or greater. So go do it, right? That's the answer. Paul, thanks for the phone call.
Regarding the nippleage, TMI, guys, TMI.
Well, okay, let me
reset that story.
Let me explain, because that wasn't from this show.
No, we did an average Joe, and reset the story.
So I played football, youth football, growing up with Bo Pelini's son, Patrick. Ended up playing at Notre Dame, by the way. Walked on and had a solid career there for himself. He's better than football at me, or better at football than me. But anyway, basically, long story short, once a year we got to go off and watch Husker football practice. Got to see some interesting things. But the one thing that you always saw was while the team was doing their team period, goal line, red zone, whatever it be, 1v1s, 1v2s, the specialists, and I mean placeholder, kicker, punter, long snapper, were always on the side working on their craft. And I can't remember for the life of me who the long snapper was, but he was sitting there by us and was asking us, the kids, hey, left nipple, right nipple. And whatever you said, he would deliver that ball to the punter 15 yards back. Pinpoint accuracy, left nipple or right nipple. It was pretty impressive to see.
Nobody shouted the triple nipple. All right, we are winding down hour one. Michael Bruntz coming up. Matt Schick on the way. It's Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, winding down this first hour. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Like and subscribe, Hail Varsity YouTube, and can watch the show that way. Hail Varsity Radio Twitter, at HVarsity Radio. Give that a follow. Find Elijah at Turbalescence, at Schmidt_radio for me. And you have Dave chiming into the stream. Michael Bruntz coming up next hour. Matt Schick in hour two. Dave says, look, you lose 3 games, your CFP chances are done.
Unless your name's Alabama.
Well, fair. And to be fair with Alabama, their SEC schedule was good. And I said I wanted them in the playoff. They didn't handle their schedule. You don't get rocked like you did by Oklahoma. And you don't get whacked by Vandy. Vandy's good, decent team, but they played Wisconsin on the road. Like their out of conference schedules always been pretty stringent. Mm-hmm. I know they're going to sneak in the directional school before Auburn, like a Samford or somebody like that. But for the most part, they'll play in Alabama. I should say they'll play at Wisconsin. Who do they open with?
But the flip side of that though is I mean they
don't have a ninth conference game.
Their road game against Wisconsin is essentially just a ninth conference game, and then they have 3 warm-up schools, whereas your Big Ten schools have 9 conference games plus 1 usually premier other Power 4 team.
You've got a couple.
So you have 10 hard games a year.
You've got a couple schools that have scheduled aggressively. Michigan, they opened with Texas, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
USC, they opened with LSU.
They always go play Notre Dame.
They have Notre Dame on top of the Big Ten slate now. So the overall, there's been a lot of so-so schedules for Big Ten teams. There's been a lot of so-so schedules for the SEC. You had about 4 squads in each league that flex a little. Nebraska, Colorado, when you booked it, you weren't sure what either'd be.
That's fair. One thing I would say, though, if I'm the playoff committee moving forward, and I want to ask Schick what he would change about the playoff now that we've kind of seen it in its full form here this year, is do you, as a committee, you go to the conference and say, hey, you guys need to get your poop in a group here and figure out how many conference games everyone's going to play.
We need to mandate it.
That's what I'm saying. Well, does the NCAA have power to do that? No, probably not.
They don't have power, and the SEC and ESPN are going to, show who they need to, who's boss.
Because the first step is if one team plays 9 conference games, another one plays 8, and they both have 3 losses, well, clearly it's not apples to apples whenever you're comparing those.
You got rewarded if you're Indiana for 11 wins, and you got rewarded for playing a 9th conference game. Okay? That's probably your edge on top of Alabama doing dirty things to their bed sheets against Vandy or Oklahoma. You can lose one of those maybe, and you edge out Indiana. You can't lose both of them. Snitley chimes in, part of the Boulder Peace Treaty. Brian, good to hear from you. Says Nebraska needs to be tampering with Jordan Seaton yesterday. There's your left tackle, fellas. Guy can ball. We'll ask Schick about his beloved Buffaloes and Coach Prime. I'm keeping an eye on that thing. That's interesting. Tuck, good to have you. He misses Justice. Justice will be back
next week.
All right, Buddy Love is in.
What?
Someone screamed Sherman, Sherman, Sherman.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back into it. It's hour 2 at Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We welcome in Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7 Sports at Michael Bruntz on Twitter. Bruntsy, what was Sean Payton's first job? Any guess?
Oh, with the size of that play sheet, maybe he was a waiter or waitress, a waiter,
yeah.
Maybe something like that.
I don't have the answer. I just like throwing darts with because I mean he probably could just give you the specials, the seafood catch, and for sure the get the souffle, get 2.
Yes, I did a quick search here, and it's unclear what his first job was. So that's too bad. He was an analyst at San Diego State.
Okay.
Well, if you include the playing career, backup quarterback in the Arena Football League. For the Chicago Bruisers.
Yep.
That's an arena. That's an arena team name if I've ever heard one, man.
He played for the Leicester Panthers of the UK Budweiser National League. This is that's some serious mileage there.
Brunsey ever get to arena ball, either the B for the Lincoln Capitals or Renegades?
I bet I did. There used to be one in San Jose back in the day. I saw one of those. I'm familiar.
Some of us did games for them 20 years ago.
Wait, you played?
No, I didn't play. Back when there was such thing as the Pershing Center, that's where the Capitals would play.
They had other names though, right? Wasn't that the Lightning? Wasn't there the Lincoln Lightning?
That was the original franchise. Yes.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Yeah, I went
Apologies.
I went to a game about. It had to have been 15 years ago because I remember this distinctly. It was the night they caught the Boston Bombers. So I remember that very distinctly. Was that 15 years ago? Probably then. Were you still doing the games then?
Jose Jefferson was head coach, and God, when did I do it? I think it was 2004. That rings a bell. I think it was 2004, and I got to see him do the beef. That was a sweet game, and then the last game I did was out in Wyoming, and it wasn't scenic Wyoming. It was a 4 million hour bus ride where me and Dan Veely-Waldrop crushed Coors.
Oh man, that's a good name.
I know.
Dan Veely-Waldrop. Yeah.
And I didn't ask him if he wanted the last beer. I just let him take it. A case of beer. I love it. Okay, Bruntz, let's talk some Nebraska football. And we got the dead period going. Is there another Dan Veely-Waldrop out there for Nebraska in the portal?
You talk offensive lineman?
Yes, sir.
Nebraska's kind of in waiting mode with Shiaz Pete, the offensive tackle from New Mexico State. He visited prior to the dead period, and that's kind of the last remaining big need for Nebraska is adding another tackle if they can. And Michigan's there for him. Kentucky believes that they're in it for him as well. And we'll see if Nebraska can successfully add another tackle out of the portal there. But at least with the dead period now, I mean, it's finally quieted a little bit in terms of options out there, and then also classes are actually starting now, so guys are going to have to find landing spots and stop the movement. But that's kind of the last big one out there for Nebraska right now.
Well, we had both Tim Verghese and Charlie McBride on yesterday. Brunstein, we asked them if you could go get a difference-making player at any position for the Huskers. They both said center. What do you think Nebraska does at the center spot next year? You have Justin Evans, who has history there, but played well at guard this year. You got some younger guys, Sam Sledge being one that a name that really comes to mind. Does Nebraska go internal with the center? Do you think they're still looking at portal options there? What does that position look like for Nebraska in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I think, kind of long term, I always kind of felt like Justin Evans' spot was going to be at center. I mean, I think, that's a position that he's fairly comfortable at. He knows the offense really well, which I think is a key piece of what you kind of have to do from that spot. And, you kind of look at what Nebraska has on their roster right now. I mean, it's a very guard-heavy roster. And I think they feel good about a number of the young guys that they have in the program. Henry Lutovsky's coming back, so I don't think they'll have too much trouble finding a guard if they choose to move Justin Evans over. Center, it's a little bit more of a premium position in the portal, not as much as tackle, but maybe I'm wrong or speaking out of school here, but my assumption has always been that Justin Evans would move over once Ben Scott moved on. And, I think, you've seen the last couple of years the benefit of having solid center play. I mean, you go back before Ben Scott was there, and that was a position that Nebraska had never really seemed to, kind of find a guy that was more of a true center and a guy that was really comfortable there. It always felt like they were kind of having to shoehorn somebody in there. So we'll see what they do. But I mean, I think that's a pretty strong option if you're in Nebraska right now, because it felt like it was, Justin Evans is almost more moonlighting at guard with the assumption that he'd move back to center whenever the spot opened a little bit for him.
Bruntz, I look at the high possibility of Turner Corcoran coming back. You've got Gatula once he gets back from being on the mend. And then a guy that, we've seen a little bit of time at guard is Turner Corcoran, because I think he'll obviously get the invite to come back. And can he end a marathon career with a good final season? Because Turner was playing okay tackle before he got dinged, playing better tackle, quite frankly, but he's also spent time at guard. Is that an option that's got lots of mileage on him as far as just the experience part being in school?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of always been the natural place where I think everybody felt he would end up. I mean, I think he played tackle in large part because of the need, more so than maybe that being his optimal position. I think that would be something that Nebraska would look pretty heavily at potentially moving him in there when he's healthy, and if everything works for him to come back, which I think that's kind of where things are headed right now. So they've got a number of options. I mean, even Grant Bricks, who was recruited as a tackle, had gotten some time at guard this year as one of those young guys that I think you kind of have to pay attention to. Jason McChaychok is another regular on the 2 deep for Nebraska at guard. So, like I said, I mean, I don't think that's a spot where they're really lacking for options right now, and I think that's why you've seen them be much more aggressive with pursuing tackles in the transfer portal. I mean, those are just harder positions to recruit and find guys that are more natural tackles. I mean, that there's a reason why it's a premium position, but I do think though that if they have Corcoran back, I mean, I think he's a guy that you could look at as a tackle, but also I think for a number of years, every year it kind of feels like, well, do they have the depth of tackle where they can finally move him inside? I mean, I think if everything kind of works in Nebraska's favor here, by the time they get to August, that might actually be something that would potentially happen.
Michael, in terms of competition you expect to see in the spring, where does the offensive line rank on the team? Where do you expect to see the fiercest competition this spring? I mean, the places where transfer portal guys have been brought in is the easy answer: wide receiver, defensive back, offensive line. But if you just rank where you expect to see the most competition in the spring, where is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think defensive back, even though, they brought in a lot of guys there, I mean, that's a group that's got to shake out. When you look at the numbers of scholarship players that they've got on the roster, even, without the additions this year, it's a lot. A large percentage of their scholarships are currently tied up in that secondary. And, you've got a new coach in the defensive coordinator chair. You've got a new secondary coach. And the turnover that you had from last year, too, is pretty significant. I mean, you've got Tommy Hill moving on. We'll see what happens with Singleton if he decides to take advantage of that extra year with the JUCO stuff. Gifford's out the door. And, they've added a lot of guys the last couple of recruiting classes in that secondary, and I don't know that there's been a ton of guys that have kind of distinguished themselves to this point as kind of the next man up for that group. And so, that's why you saw a guy like Donovan Jones in the bowl game be able to step in and play the way that he did. He really took advantage of that opportunity. So I know it's kind of an obvious one, but, I mean, just sheer numbers and kind of knowing that, you're going to have to figure out the numbers to get down to that 105. I mean, you have to assume that some of that attrition is going to come from the secondary, and it's going to be pretty darn competitive this spring, I think.
Bruntz, I want to go to the recruiting front, and 4-star running back that is out there, DeZephan Walker. Taking a look at Kansas, the end of May will be part of Nebraska's visit list. June 20th. Was here for Nebraska, Colorado. 2026 kid, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Is there a comp for him? Who does he remind you of?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a comp that kind of immediately comes to mind. I mean, he's 5'11", 190, is a little bit of a bigger back. But, when you kind of start following the visits, and, I mean, he's a guy that Nebraska's kind of had their eye on for, over a year now as a potential guy that was towards the top of their recruiting board at running back. And I know that, when he visited earlier this year for a game, I mean, he got a lot of attention from staffers, and the coaches were all coming over to him on the sidelines and things like that, and making sure that, he was kind of feeling that love. So, a guy that, is in that 500-mile radius right down in the Kansas City area. And, they're going to have to – Nebraska's done a good job to this point, I think, and especially with Jamar Mosey having a bigger role in recruiting and kind of getting into Kansas City and being able to kind of make themselves felt there. So that'll be another test in the 2026 class. But it's always a good sign when, you're sitting here in the middle of January and you've already got, official visits locked in for the summer. You still have a junior day coming up in a few weeks here to potentially get him and other prospects on campus. So, I think Nebraska's in a decent spot for him with, Missouri and Kansas being right there as well.
It's Michael Bruntz with us here. And Bruntzy, before we wind things down and get you out, should we even talk about what happened Sunday morning in West Lafayette with Nebraska, Purdue, and basketball?
I think we needed the Belichick thing. They're on to Rutgers, I think.
Well, I saw your tweet yesterday at Michael Bruntz on Twitter, and pretty stoked about the Fred Hoiberg air freshener. What would the Michael Bruntz air freshener smell like? What would the scent be?
Just aggressive pine. That's what it would be. just way too much. Like you're just sticking your face right in a Christmas tree. That's what a real Christmas tree. That's what it would be.
Aggressive pine. You've been putting that in the back pocket for a while. I love it.
We're talking pine sol, or even more aggressive than that?
It's just more aggressive than that. I asked this, and it's a fair question, I think, for the room here. Is if you had to have any former Husker air freshener, what direction would you go? Like, who would you want dangling from your car windshield there, or your mirror?
Brother, I'm going to go back in time, and we know what the scent may smell like. I'm going to go Kamani Friend.
Okay.
Just fool those German shepherds.
Yeah. Okay.
What a question this is. I don't know. Jorge Brian Diaz, maybe?
What would the scent be?
I don't know. I like food from South America, Central America. Hopefully something.
You're gonna go El Grande, huh?
No. It's an impossible question.
Yeah. Well, I'm not even saying the scent because it's a little picture of like Fred's head.
Face.
Like
yeah.
That's yeah. If you had an old lineman in there that just smelled like blocking for 60 minutes on a 90-degree day in September. I mean maybe
that will absolutely
the scent of swamp ass.
Yeah, the scent is swamp ass, right?
Yeah.
Jeez, my Lord.
Well, Bruntz, on a different note before we get out here, can you believe we're a month away from the start of Husker baseball? February 14th.
Yeah, I know it sneaks up on you fast. I think there's reason to be excited. You saw the top 25 ranking from D1 baseball, which it's a veteran club. I think it'll be intriguing. I can't recall this difficult of a non-conference schedule by a Nebraska baseball team in the Big Ten era. It's going to be a tough one, but good. I think they've got some good pitching depth. They returned basically everybody except for Karen in the lineup, so a lot of potential there. But yeah, they're. I believe they start practice here in 10 days, which is kind of crazy to say.
Bruntzy will do this again, and we'll come up with more Husker air freshener ideas. All right.
Just ask around, see what people think. I would be curious to hear the answers.
All right. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Let's say hi to Matt Schick. He is a Bills fan. He is smiling. You also see and hear him with ESPN Radio, Sirius XM, ACC Network, and the Schick and Nick Show podcast with Hurrdat Sports. Schick, what's the good word, man? How you doing this week?
Oh, doing great. Not a lot going on. Just my NFL team is off and running. My college team might be looking for a new coach. So it's kind of getting pulled in a couple separate directions here.
Do you have any words of encouragement or taunting for Elijah and his Denver team?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that was rough. Well,
for some reason, you said it all right there. I don't think you need to say anything else.
The tone was so thick. I loved it. That was rough.
What's funny is my brother and my father, my parents and my brother and his family live in Colorado. And they're Bills fans, but they are subjected to Denver sports talk radio. And they'll listen sometimes just to get a kick out of it. And after Denver beat the Chiefs, the talk of what their path was and how they could do it and get to the Super Bowl, and the path just being, I don't know, Bills, Ravens, Chiefs, just three very easy teams to beat. But there was a false sense of confidence there, Elijah, of after beating the Carson Wentz-led Chiefs the way that they did, that they could get through Buffalo. And that was just a little bit of false hope there.
Well, let's be honest. Any team that's in the postseason, like the fan base is allowed to have that thought, no matter how far-fetched it was. Because Schmidt can attest from him and I talking last week on this show. I kept it in check. I said no matter what happened Sunday, this season was a success. Let's hope for the best. That's kind of where I was at, but I don't think you can blame a fan base that hasn't been in the postseason for 9 years for having high hopes and saying, you know what, anything can happen in the postseason.
Elijah did say Buffalo by 100. I mean, we have that on tape.
No, I don't blame fans. I blame what are supposed to be responsible sports talk radio hosts for stirring it up locally, going, hey, we can do this. No, you can't. I mean, you need to be a realist, folks. Just be a realist.
Let's keep in that realm of real and talk about Nebraska and the college football playoff next year, Matt.
Wait, I'm sorry. What did you say? I'm sorry. You seem to cut out there. You seem to cut out.
I am asking this half serious from an expectations in a year 3 standpoint. I mean, if Indiana can get there in year 1 at Kurt Signetti and Nebraska's got the NIL machine, could it be a discussion point a year from now? Possibly. I don't know. I haven't quite made my mind up. It seems a little soon, but other teams are doing it. Colorado is knocking on the playoff door till Kansas happened.
Well, that's all true. The challenge for programs that haven't done it in a while is your margin for error becomes very, very slim. And, just think about what happened to Indiana, where they're 11-1, and there's still a lot of, are we sure about this team? And, yeah, they were somewhat comfortably in, but, I mean, if Ole Miss beats Florida, we might be talking about Indiana on the bubble there. A bunch of things still had to happen for Indiana to feel comfortable about their inclusion. But, to your point, it certainly can be done. And talking to Brett Bielema, even after their win against South Carolina in the bowl game, I asked him how much, they think, why not us? And he said, absolutely. And they point to the Indiana factor. So I would never fault any fan base, going back to the Broncos thing, for thinking that can be accomplished. It's certainly a giant step. I think Indiana is one of those exceptions, not the rules, but certainly allows you to dream big about it. But, when you think about it, you've got Oregon, you've got Penn State, you've got Ohio State. Those are almost your 3 givens every single year. So can you, as Nebraska, be that 4th team? Because the Big Ten is going to be hard-pressed to get 5 teams in a 12-team playoff. Can you be that 4th team? That's a tough thing to break up into, and something that, is going to be, you're at the mercy of health, a bounce here or there, and most importantly, your schedule.
It's Matt Schick with us here. And Matt, to continue this conversation a little bit, as you look around the college football landscape, teams that want to try and make a run at the college football playoff, feels like the 2 things you got to have first and foremost is you got to have your coach right, and then you got to have your quarterback right. And following that, you can build around those 2. As you kind of saw with Colorado, I think in year 1, they saw Travis Hunter, but they had the coach they wanted, they got the quarterback they wanted, and then in year 2, they're able to use the portal and build around them and make a run towards the college football playoff. With that in mind, do you think Nebraska has the coach and the quarterback right to now go and start plugging in the other pieces around and make a run towards the playoff?
Yeah, I think it's more about track record and belief than it is about what you see right now, if that makes any sense. Like, I think there is that possibility, but it's based on what Matt Rhules done in the past and what we believe Dylan Raiola is going to be. Here's the good news, is that when you look up and down this playoff, it's not like it was loaded with elite-level quarterback play.
No.
You know, this isn't like Joe Burrow and LSU lighting things up. I mean, this is Sam Leavitt. It's a Quinn Ewers who still has some room to grow. It's a Will Howard who was just at Kansas State. You know, it's a Drew Aller who has a lot of room to grow. It's a Riley Leonard who is not going to be an NFL quarterback. So you think about these things, and it starts to give you hope that you want to check those boxes, but it's not like they need to be top 5 or even top 10 at their respective position to do that.
Schick, what do you think of the championship matchup? What have you thought of the playoffs?
I think the playoff has been better than anticipated. I think it has reached a matchup that, you know, maybe you'd rather have an SEC versus Big Ten to spread it out a little bit, but I'm eagerly anticipating this. I think the first round blowouts, what we have gotten to, the semifinals made the first round blowouts worth it, and kind of got our appetite whetted a little bit with that double overtime Texas win over Arizona State. I think the first round blowouts, most of that, I think, can be solved with proper seeding. You know, even the NFL doesn't have proper seeding, and we've seen what happens there when you just give division champs home games or automatic bids, and that's fine. But sometimes you get what we got in the first round. So, you know, I think moving forward, it'll be interesting to see if they decide to reseed it or seed it properly. I don't think you need to reseed after every round necessarily. I think a fixed bracket is fine, just like the FCS does. Just make sure we're 1 through 12. But at the same point, we got some good brands, we got some great matchups, and we got 3 northern schools in the semis. Like there's a sea change happening in college football. Not that the SEC is never going to win another title. They might be the favorite to win it next year. But more importantly, it's going to be spread around. You know, you're going to have opportunities no matter what coast you're on and no matter what hemisphere you're on.
Well, let's quickly talk about the reseeding. You mentioned that for a second. My big problem with doing reseeding in the college football playoff is that the college football playoff rankings are 100% subjective. You look at like the NFL or the NBA, and, well, there's a simple answer. Hey, you don't want to play the hardest schedule in the playoffs? Well, win more games during the regular season. That argument doesn't necessarily fly in college football, where preconceived notions and biases are now affecting what teams route they have to the college football playoff. Exactly. So that's kind of my issue against reseeding. Let me ask you, though, do you eliminate buys moving forward with the champions, considering they were all so bad this year? Like, that seems to be the first fix that you make, that you try to get instituted by next year. Just get rid of that buy system.
I would keep the buys if we could have home games in the quarterfinals.
Okay.
So at least you're guaranteed a different campus for a quarterfinal round. Then, you know, I wouldn't want to repeat first and quarters with that. So if you kept the bye, I would say quarterfinals on campus. If not, I'm totally fine with doing away with the bye. The issue, and I get what you're saying about it being subjective. It's all subjective. You're ranking 1 through 12. But the issue is, if we're asking these people to rank 1 through 12, then go with what the rankings are. You know, what's the point on ranking 1 through 12 if we're pulling the 17th best team, you know, into the field? And it's fine to do that, but at some point it messes up with the rankings. And I'm good with, don't get me wrong, I'm good with Clemson getting in. I'm good with Arizona State getting in. Like, those teams should get into the college football playoff. But when your 12th best team gets a top 4 bye, the rest of the bracket gets a little screwed up. Now, here's where the bye, and here's where the top 4 highest-ranked conference camps getting a bye is beneficial. It's beneficial because it takes out the preseason narrative bias, which is, if you go into the preseason, you go into this season, you say, hey, here's how I think this is going to be, and you start ranking these teams, you know, you would not – the chances of the Big 12 getting a top 4 seed are slim to none unless they run the table. And same with the ACC in a season like this. It would have been really challenging to do because you lose one game. It's like, oh, so your conference sucks. But SEC, you lose 2 games, so you can get a top 4 seed. So it allows Arizona State, allows the Big 12, allows ACC this year to get those buys and do that, even a Boise State. But let's also be honest about it. If UNLV beat Boise State in the Mountain West Conference Championship game, Clemson would have gotten a bye. Clemson would have gotten a bye into the quarterfinals. And to me, that just doesn't sit right with me.
Matt Schick with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. Schick, hang tight. We're up against it. We'll continue our conversation. We love running Schick down with ESPN and the ACC network. And, you catch him with the Schick and Nick podcast with Hurrdat Sports. Captain is back at it, and he says Nebraska will make the college football playoff in 2025. You too can chime in the stream, Hail Varsity YouTube. Buddy back, he says the days of wondering if an 11-win Big Ten team is getting a college football playoff versus a 9 or a 10-win SEC team is gone. The SEC lost a lot of street cred this year. They did take a big hit. They didn't have a good bowl season. And the Big Ten, I know Indiana, their performance against Notre Dame has helped that with their run to the title game. And Ohio State is I believe, an 8 seed. You knew that they were right there with being one of the best teams in college football with their roster. You didn't know if they could put it together. They lost to Michigan, yes. They lost to Oregon, yes. They avenged the Oregon loss. Oregon, I still think, is probably top 4.
Well, can I say something just back to the SEC? Did they lose some street cred this year? Yes. A lot? No. Well, we saw. I mean, there has to be a lot of what we saw this year for the decade of. It's got to continue.
Dominance. They have won 13 out of 17 titles with 5 different teams.
Yeah, the decade of dominance is still going to carry some weight there.
But the Big Ten is knocking on back-to-back. Michigan last year, maybe Ohio State this year.
Possibly.
We'll see.
Let's not count our chickens before they're hatched.
Reminder. Well, I'm cheering for Notre Dame. Reminder to get buckled up. It prevents injuries. Use your seatbelt if properly worn. Make it click. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. More with Schick on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Matt Schick's with us, ESPNU, Sirius XM, Schick and Nick podcast. Love talking playoff. It's been a dynamite postseason, and I was at a bar after.
Shocker.
Right, I know. I knew that was coming. The whole audience just echoed it. Oh, really? Huh? The wife wanted to go, Schick. It was after a Southwest high school game, and was doing the game on radio. So we went and saw the fourth quarter of the Texas-Ohio State game, and you know, the return on a major investment for Ohio State needs to be a championship. I think Ohio State's got an incredible roster. You're plugged into the national kind of narrative and showcase of college football. What's Texas fan feeling or thinking right now? Are they ticked? Are they okay with getting to the Final Four? What are you hearing from Austin?
Well, the vibe seems to be glad we made it, but it's almost easier to say that without watching how the game finished. They had every opportunity to win that game. It felt like we were on the verge of having a similar thing with what Penn State and Notre Dame went through, where it felt like Penn State was the better team. It felt like they outplayed Notre Dame, but had self-inflicted wounds, made mistakes. Notre Dame took advantage, got the win. It felt like Ohio State was headed that way with Trevion Henderson with the personal foul and offensive penalties and, you know, blown coverages, and then Texas is on the verge of doing it. But when you're on the doorstep of tying, you know, when you're first and goal at the 1, you get a pass interference, so you get a redo at first and goal at the 1, and then you do what they did and lose 17 yards and fumble the ball and it goes the other way. You know, then it brings into question, what are we doing and why did this happen? And it's a microcosm. If you're a Texas fan, we've had red zone issues all season. It hurt us again. Reared its ugly head. We couldn't even score from the 1. I don't care who it's against. The 85 Bears or the Ohio State Buckeyes. You got to get it in if you're Texas. And then you've got, you know, even last year against Washington in the national semifinal. Again, you're in the red zone. You're a throwaway. Get it into the end zone. Weren't able to do it. So those issues have got to be solved. Maybe Arch Manning is the big elixir, and I think if you were a Texas fan, you're ready to turn the page on Quinn Ewers, even though I thought he played a heck of a game, and you're ready for the very low-publicized and unheralded Arch Manning to take the reins.
Sure. Schick, I want to get to Boulder and Dallas and ask you what you believe. Do you believe that Prime is going to be working for Jerry? do you believe that he stays in Boulder? And let's say that he goes to Big D. Where does Colorado turn? Let's play that game.
Where do they turn? They turn to the heavens and pray for an answer because, Deion Sanders has delivered everything that they hoped he would outside of a playoff bid, but no one was thinking that when he first came on board. My gut says he stays. Maybe there's a leverage play. Maybe they'll give him more money. He doesn't need it, but he probably deserves it. So I'm guessing he's going to stay. But my goodness, what a Deion Sanders, if he's offered the job, I just don't know how you say no to it. I really don't. He's got a home in Texas. He's made his home there. I don't think he's a fish out of water at Colorado by any means, and I think there's a lot of things pulling him there. And you just signed one of the top quarterbacks in Juju Lewis, and maybe it's your chance to prove you can win without your son as your quarterback. There might be that thing there too. And if I'm Shedeur, I'm probably like, hey, Dad, you can coach in the NFL, but I want to be on a different team. There's got to be some sort of separation there, you would think, so he can live on his own a little bit. But my gut says he stays, but that's because my gut says he's not going to be offered the job. But my goodness, it feels like Jerry and Deion are kismet, that it certainly wouldn't be surprising. But to just texting with some Colorado alum, it feels like, Deion has done everything that he's been asked to do. You've gotten such a major return on the investment that you made in him that even if he left, I know there's going to be a bunch of people that are ticked off, but I wouldn't blame him.
See, Schick, I live for drama. I think the ideal circumstance in my mind is that Coach Sanders goes off to the Cowboys. The Cowboys trade away Dak Prescott and some picks. They go move up to number 1 overall. And with that number 1 overall pick, they take Cam Ward. I think that would be the funniest possible outcome.
That'd be an awkward Thanksgiving.
Yeah, trade up to take Shedeur's friend. That would be an amazing thing. Yeah, it's like, it's hard to it's one thing for a player and his father to say, hey, we don't want to be drafted by this team, we're not going to sign. It's another for a guy to join the NFL and say, here's the guy I'm going to draft. It's like, wait a second, you're outside the top 10. Like, how are you going to finagle that? Is the NFL going to do what the NBA did for Braun and Bronny? Like, just make sure they allow it to happen so this cool thing can happen? Not when a perhaps franchise-changing quarterback is available at Shedeur. So, yeah, I'm fascinated to see. The next best thing would be just Coach Prime going to Dallas and then yelling at Dak Prescott. Those kind of things were just the frustration in Big D. And then Jerry Jones being interviewed post-game and speaking for the team when Deion Sanders is the coach. That would be great.
Yeah, the shine the light on me. I'm Jerry. I own the team. That competition for voice.
Right.
I know a lot's made of it, but it's real. I mean, it's absolutely real.
Yeah. He gets Jason Garrett, who, is now a front-facing guy on TV, but is kind of a quiet, soft-spoken guy. You get a Mike McCarthy, who Jerry probably feels like he's better looking than Mike McCarthy. So, there's a lot of things there.
There is. Cam Ward's my favorite son, Shedeur, but you're number 2. Yeah. Give me a prediction here, Baltimore, Buffalo, before we say goodbye.
I actually think the Ravens win. I really think they're the second best team in the AFC. Even though we joked about how the Bills blew out the Broncos, that was kind of a nip-and-tuck game midway through the third quarter. And I think if the Ravens play the Broncos in the postseason, that would have been very different. I think there's a reason for that. I might be playing a little possum here, kind of like Elijah. You plan for the worst, hope for the best. But I think Lamar and that Ravens defense is going to be the difference here. Unless it snows and Lamar catches a cold, I think that's the way this is going to go. But here's the thing, guys. Like Sunday night, I'm in Springfield, Massachusetts. I'm going to be calling some high school all-star games, Springfield, Mass, for the Hoop Hall Classic with my friend Paul Biancardi. We do it every year. And my second game is 7 o'clock. A.J. DiBonzo, who's the number 1 player in the country, he's headed to BYU, the NIL stuff. I'm going to be calling that game, but I'm going to have an eye. I'm going to have the iPad up. I'm going to be watching, the Ravens and the Bills. So if I say, oh, my gosh, what an incredible dunk by Josh Allen, that's where things could get into trouble. But hopefully it'll be I'll be in a good mood.
Well, you know what? We're kind of pulling for Buffalo. We like the Bills. You are a big time Bills guy.
Hey, don't say we. We're pulling for the Bills.
You got to be pulling for them. They stuck a knife in your donkeys, and you got to cheer for the team that just beat you.
Yeah, to be fair,
it's
right
like
now.
College. It's like the transitive property in college. Then you can say you're de facto Super Bowl champs.
See, if it wouldn't have been for Buffalo, Denver, right? So,
I shouldn't say this with our listening audience, but my feel right now is anyone but the Chiefs, and I'll be happy.
Yeah. Yeah, the audience.
I think you're preaching there. Yeah, you're preaching.
Won't like that. But Schick, enjoy your week, and thanks for the time, man.
Anytime, guys. Thank you.
Good to spend time with Schick. We'll wind down a Tuesday next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hope you're doing okay. And thanks for spending time with us on a Tuesday. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. When you search Hail Varsity Radio, give us a rating, good, bad, or ugly. We encourage you to tell us what you think. Hail Varsity YouTube can like and subscribe. The video portion, Elijah will get the show up and edit it down for the video. And you're always welcome to chime in on the stream and hear us along the Hail Varsity Radio Network. Captain asked the question what the incredible should-be Hall of Famer Roger Craig had in common with Derrick Henry. And, I know Roger was the first to do 1,000 and 1,000, the second being Marshall Faulk. And maybe, I don't think James Brooks, the old Cincinnati running back, I think he was close. He's a good receiver out of the backfield. So Buddy checks in, says Derrick Henry's never had 1,000-yard receiving. And Ken, I agree with you. So...
Yeah. What do they have in common? Derrick Henry's got 1,000.
Birthday? I don't know.
He's got 1,000 career receiving yards.
I know that Roger's not 6'3", 240. We need Artez to chime in. Roger Craig's brother, who listens to us via the stream. He's an over-the-road trucker.
Well, think about how wild it is if you go back to Roger Craig, though, 1,000 and 1,000. Like Mike Evans, I know he's done it year after year after year, but think about a running back out-receiving Mike Evans, which is essentially what Roger Craig went and did, in addition to 1,000 rushing yards.
Sure.
Wild. Because when you go back and look at Mike Evans, it's pretty funny how close he was to 1,000 yards every single season in this, 9-season streak he's on.
And the thing about Evans, Evans was catching punts from Johnny Football, the Heisman year. All right? Was catching, for sure, Johnny Football's second season at A&M. Okay? Against Alabama, that shootout 45-42 to start off SEC play. I mean, Evans was incredible. And Evans was a teammate and a buddy at Terran Petaway, both from Galveston, down that direction. But no, Mike Evans, the guy misses a game or two, we'll say 3 per season, with some sort of soft tissue deal. And I'm not calling him weak. I think he's awesome. I mean, he's always on my fantasy team. But Buddy says Roger was 6'2", 220. Yeah. So, no, Mike Evans, incredible. Levante David sticking up for his coach today. Do you think we'll know by the end of the week, Coach Prime in Dallas?
End of the week's pretty early.
Do you think?
Well, there's a lot.
Who do you send? Who do you send to Tennessee? Can you send a first? What would you send to Tennessee? Would you send Micah Parsons and another first round pick?
God, you can't do that.
Well,
if there's one guy in the roster that's untouchable, it's got to be Parsons.
I don't disagree, but
it would have to be a package. I think Dak and 3 first rounders and a future second or third rounder too. That's what you'd have to be talking here.
Mm-hmm. Do you want Dak if you're Tennessee?
You can always have him for a year and cut him. You need a quarterback next year.
No, I know.
If I'm Dallas, this is not the draft you want to trade up number 1 overall in. This draft, not the one.
No.
But if you want the guarantee of either Shedeur or Travis, that's what you got to go do. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Tomorrow, we'll check in with Evan Bland, Mike Babcock, maybe a Mark Manning sighting. Talk to you tomorrow at 4. Thanks.